So we'll start with some guided meditation, just about 10 minutes or so of guided meditation. You can move your body in whatever way helps you to loosen any tension and to come into an upright posture. And feeling the weight of your body on the seat. Releasing the belly and noticing the natural stability of the body. And beginning to turn the attention to the sensations of hearing. Just receiving whatever sounds become apparent. Being curious about the sensations of sound, sensations of hearing. Ahora interpretación. And as much as possible, allowing sound to be merely sound, without any judgments and clinging or pushing away. Coming back again and again to the sensations of sound. And when you cannot perceive any sounds and there is silence, then you can attend to that absence of sound. And as we come to the last few moments of the meditation, perhaps just allowing some sound to occur with the out breath. Ah, ah. Beautiful. So that sound was the bell marking the end of the meditation. But if you want to just keep meditating while I give the Dhamma talk, that's also just fine. And both of my mics are a little low on battery, so if you stop hearing sound, just somebody please wave at me, okay, so that I can change to my other mic. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Lately, I have been thinking about what it is that makes the Dharma spiritual. Sometimes I get that question. People will say, what's spiritual about sitting down and focusing on your breath? Or about thinking about the impermanence of things? What about all that? So I want to tell you a story from 2007, right? 2008, sorry. About a year and a half after I was ordained by Roshi, Sake Harada Roshi, in Ho Shinji, a monastery called Ho Shin, Beginner's Mind Monastery in Obama, Japan. And we were in the middle of a sesshin. I think it was the May sesshin of 2008 or June. And an ambulance showed up. And it was for Roshi. It was to take, Roshi means, it's a title. It means literally old teacher or elder one. And that's why we called him Roshi. And the ambulance showed up to take Roshi to the hospital. because he was having some pain in his chest. And it turned out that he was having a heart attack. And it was actually the second heart attack that he'd had in a week, because the previous week had been feeling very bad and also having some discomfort. And he went to the hospital and they thought that it was back pain. They didn't realize that it was a heart problem. So this was his second heart attack, and it was more severe, and he was having a lot of pain and confusion. But before they put him into the ambulance, he insisted on having them wheel him over to the meditation hall where we were all meditating. And he said, "It's come to this. So do your best, because it's come to this, and I'm going now." And it wasn't until later that I realized that I appreciated how much he, in that very simple way, was acknowledging what was happening for him without any kind of a judgment at all. It's just this. It's come to this. Pretty amazing, right? He thought he'd never see any of us again, perhaps. So they took him and they put him in the ambulance, and they took him actually first to the local hospital, but then they realized there at the local hospital that he needed some cardiac care. So they took him to like the regional hospital, a bigger one that was further away from the monastery, about an hour, probably more than an hour's drive away. And they thought that he was dying. He was in very, very bad condition. They thought that he was dying. And so all of us, his students, his disciples, were taken in groups of 3 up to say our final goodbyes to him. So we went in, we would get in the car and we would go up there, and several people had already been, and they were just, distraught. They were very sad. Yes, it looks like he's dying, and definitely go say, whatever you need to say. And so we arrived there in the hospital, myself and Roshi's attendant and one other student, and he didn't have a private room. He was kind of like in a more general room with several other people. And there was a chair next to his bed. And so I walked right over and I sat down next to him at the chair, which I guess I didn't have that Japanese hesitation, social hesitation about what to do at that moment. I just went and sat down in the chair and held his hand. And I had been thinking in the car the whole way there what I would say to him. And so I leaned over, and he was really struggling. You could see that he was struggling. And they had some kind of a machine attached to his foot that was circulating the blood in his body, because he anyway, so I could see that he was kind of struggling, and I held his hand and I leaned over and I said to him something that he had said to me actually in a practice discussion a number of months back, probably one of the earliest practice discussions we had, which was, I'll say it in Japanese, so don't worry, Claudia. I'll say it again in English in a minute. Watashi to anata wa futatsu denai. Watashi to anata wa futatsu denai means, in Japanese, means you and I are not 2 things. You and I are not 2 things. And in Japanese, there's a different word for 2 things than 2 people. He didn't use the word for 2 people, futari. He used the word for 2 objects, futatsu. You and I are not 2 things. And he had said that to me in practice discussion. And I thought I understood what it meant. But then, of course, it took on this deeper meaning suddenly when it was time for him to go, perhaps to die. And in response, what Roshi did was even more surprising than the original teaching, because what Roshi did was he grabbed my hand really hard. I thought, this person is dying, because he's really holding my hand very tightly. And he said, thank you. Arigato, 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 arigato gozaimasu, arigato. And he said, thank you, 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 thank you. And I don't know if he was thanking me just for holding his hand or just for being there or for what I said or what, right? It's his moment. It's his personal moment of whatever was going on for him. But for me, this teaching was so clear at that time, because it is not a teaching that is saying that we are one. If he wanted to say that we are one, he would have said that. Roshi didn't mince words. He was very careful. He was very precise in the way that he spoke about the Dhamma. But this not to means that we are interdependent, right? That in the moment that I asked him to be my teacher and he said yes, that the teacher arises together with student. That in the moment of being there at his bedside at the hospital, my being there and his being there, just our mere presence, our mere existence, is a set of interrelated conditions. We are not two. We are not two things. We are inseparable in a way, in many ways, because we influence each other. We are part of each other's lives in very, very kind of mundane ways. And the fact that he is dying is also not two, right? That is also conditionality. And I am also dying in that moment and at every moment. That is also not two. The truth of the conditions of my life, of this body. So this teaching of conditionality is fundamental to the Dhamma. It's one of the most important teachings that Roshi left for me. And he didn't die, actually, at that time. It took many years, actually, many, many years for him to die. But he was never the same after that incident. He experienced a lot of changes in his brain, actually, after that. And but this way of understanding all things as being interdependent, it has so much meaning for us, right? The reason why I was so enamored with the teaching the first time was because I also realized that the not two means that we're never alone, actually. Even when we are alone, we are not alone. We are interdependent with all things at that time. Not all things simultaneously. I'm not trying to again, kind of create a state of oneness out of something, but rather this state of relationship with things that are related as well. So, sometimes I talk about it as like the hand is connected to the wrist, is connected to the arm, is connected to the elbow, is connected to the other arm, is connected to the shoulder, is connected to the head, right? So my hand might not be touching my head, but it's related. Yeah, that's how we can understand our relationship to things that are even, or people that are even remote. And this can become a little complex, right? Because that also means that we're related to people who are doing great harm in the world. We are related to people who are doing wonderful things in the world. We're in relationship to all of that, all of it. So how to be skillful in those relationships? That's a big question. It's not something that I would just try to answer for you. That is a question of a lifetime, really. Right? Reminds me of the koan, one of my favorite koans, where the student asks the teacher, oh, I hadn't planned on talking about this koan today, but now it's coming up. The student asks the teacher, what is the teaching of a lifetime? And the teacher responds, an appropriate response. That is the teaching of a lifetime. Try to find an appropriate response, moment after moment after moment. Or don't even try to find, but actually know appropriate response. And that is a way that we see used time and time again, this kind of responsiveness as a way of talking about how we can see our conditionality, right? So somebody calls your name and you turn your head. There's a responsiveness in this body and mind. And it's a way that we can know the conditionality. Or there's also a very, very famous sutta. And I was looking for the number of it because, as I understand it, it was given by Venerable Asaji, who was Venerable Sariputta's teacher before he met the Buddha. And he says, Ye Dhamma hetu bhava te sam hetu tathagato aha te sam chayo nirodho ewamadi mahasamano. So in Pali, that's in Pali, it means everything that has a cause, its cause has been explained by the Tathagata, the thus come one, the Buddha. And you could say everything that arises from a cause, that's important, because then the second line is also its cessation has been explained by the Buddha. So it's arising due to causes and conditions, and its cessation due to causes and conditions has been explained. This is the teaching of the great sage, the great seeker. And so clearly, these bodies and minds are things that are arising and ceasing, various states of causes and conditions arising and ceasing. And that is what makes us not two. Right? That is what makes it possible for us to be in relationship. Because if we weren't arising and ceasing, we would be permanent things, and then we would be completely separate from one another. So when you feel that sense of separation, then you must know that that is a delusion. That is an error. Yeah. And it's interesting that he begins by saying everything that arises due to a cause, because that means everything except for one thing, and that's nibbana. Nibbana is the unconditioned, that which does not have any arising or any ceasing at all. And interestingly, the Buddha described that as something that was accessible to us right here in the midst of our conditionality. But that's a talk for another day. For now, I want to stay with this part of recognizing that we are beings that are influenced. Right? So we need to take care about that. We need to really be careful about trying to understand the conditions that we have in our world, in our own experience. Yeah. So the Buddha speaks about this as often translated as guarding the sense gates, which to me has a very kind of aversive or kind of nasty connotation, like, oh, I need to put up a big wall around myself. But again, that's not possible, right? It's more like, taking care of what you put in the system, right? So in Roshi's case, what he put in the system was peace. When the time came for him to face his death, he was able to just say, oh, it's like this. Because he was able to acknowledge, accept those causes and conditions. And know that inevitability. But also know that death is just a manifestation in this moment, just as life is a manifestation in another moment. Yeah. And those causes and conditions, unless we are going to experience our parinirvana, then those causes and conditions have their momentum and will continue to resolve and resolve and resolve. Yeah? So that's the good news about karma, is that it's not permanent either. Karmic results, they arise and they cease. That is what we're seeing, in fact. This body, this mind, these are our karmic results right here. So this teaching of not two, this teaching of deep conditionality, of an all-pervasive conditionality, is also what makes the path, is a way of talking about what makes the path possible. We put in the causes and conditions for more suffering or for less suffering, for insight and wisdom to arise or for more delusion to arise. We don't have complete control over that, of course. There are innumerable conditions that are outside of our control, that are not particularly karmically driven. They're driven by other things happening in the physical world. But we can, and the Buddha says we should, pile on those good conditions as best we can. Right? Good Dhamma friends, hearing the teachings, practicing the teachings, expressing your understanding of the teachings. All of that is very important. It's very helpful. Sitting down and experiencing your breath, that's it. That's part of all the good conditions, right? And we are adding to the mix. And also helping us to accept moment by moment that state of conditionality. Some Buddhist traditions, particularly in Tibetan school, for example, are very explicit about preparing for death. Right? But you could say that any time that we become more clear about conditionality, about arising and ceasing of all things, that is preparing for our moment of death, is preparing for that great transition that will happen. One beyond which we cannot see. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just how it works, right? It's just how it works. I was having a conversation with a gentleman at the cafe a few weeks back, and he was saying that somebody here in England related to soccer got in trouble for saying that kids with disabilities are that way because of something they did in their past life. And people felt like that was saying, that they deserved it in some way, or something like that it's a punishment. And I said, well, if you don't understand the nature of conditionality, then it will seem like that. It will seem like karma is a way of meting out sort of moral punishments and rewards. But actually, one way to think about it is this metaphor of the butterfly, right? So the caterpillar, maybe some of you have heard this before. The caterpillar doesn't know why, but the time comes when it makes its chrysalis, right? It builds this little nest around itself, completely covered from head to toe, and attaches itself to a branch there. And then what happens? Then the caterpillar actually becomes liquefied. Maybe you don't know this biology, but that's how it works. The caterpillar goes away completely. And then somehow from that DNA and all that stuff that's in there, then a butterfly forms. And the butterfly breaks through that chrysalis. But does the butterfly remember the caterpillar? No. Is the butterfly related somehow to the caterpillar? Yes, definitely, right? It didn't come out of some other chrysalis. It came out of that particular chrysalis on that particular branch that particular being, that caterpillar, made for itself in a way, right? But that's its next thing. So the caterpillar doesn't know the butterfly, and the butterfly doesn't know the caterpillar. And that's okay. It has to be okay because that's how it works. It's come to this, right? This is how it is. So that means don't worry about your future. Put in the conditions right now. Live your life in a way that you come to understand conditionality, that you come to have those causes, those beneficial causes in your life. And know that the process is doing what the process does. And the Buddha has explained how to use that process toward a path of awakening, toward a path of absolute peace with whatever comes. So you and I are not two, every one of you, every one of you. And Roshi and I are not two, even though he's passed now years ago. It's all right. And we are blessed to have these wonderful teachings to help us to understand.